Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihadi Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatiravana Chadi Jamunatiravana Chadi Avanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Hari Vijagacharya Astatara Satati Simaris Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gora Premanandi. We're getting closer to Gaur Purnima. And we're getting into the final section of chapter 1. Final chapter of chapter 1, Madhya Khanda. And Lord Chaitanya is manifesting wonderful pastimes with his devotees as he's going deeper and deeper. Yeah. Starting with text 295. This is Lord Chaitanya's manifesting himself in his mood of an ecstatic devotee. And he's also giving teachings of the holy name. Nam Sankirtan. That's the title of the chapter. By providence, one most fortunate Brahmin was sitting at the doorstep of a nearby house. He was well known by the name Ratnagarbha Acharya, and he was a friend of the Lord's father, being born in the same village. His three sons, Krishnananda, Jiva, and Yadunath Kavichandra, were like bees at the lotus feet of Krishna. That topmost Brahmana had the highest respect for the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he would recite the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam with great affection. When the hungry cowherd boys requested Krishna for some food, he sent them to some brahmanas who were performing sacrifices nearby, but they were turned away by the brahmanas because they considered Krishna an ordinary mortal being. Disappointed, the cowherd boys returned to Krishna, who then sent them to the wives of those brahmanas. As soon as those brahmanas' wives, who were spontaneously attracted to hearing the transcendental qualities of Krishna, heard of Krishna's appeal for food, they immediately took innumerable foodstuffs of 4 types with them, and in spite of being obstructed by their husbands, brothers, and friends, they came to Krishna with unmotivated and uninterrupted devotion, like a river naturally flows to the ocean, and saw him as follows. It gives the Sanskrit in its description of Krishna's appearance. His complexion was dark blue, and his garments were golden, wearing a peacock feather, colored minerals, sprigs of flower buds, and a garland of forest flowers and leaves. He was dressed like a dramatic dancer. He rested one hand upon the shoulder of a friend, and with the other twirled a lotus. Lilies graced his ears, his hair hung down over his cheeks, and his lotus-like face was smiling. As he devotedly recited the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam with great satisfaction, the sound of his recitation entered the ears of the Lord. When the Lord heard that glorification of devotional service, finished. He lost external consciousness and fell to the ground. All the Lord's students became struck with wonder. Shortly thereafter, the Lord regained his external consciousness. Upon regaining consciousness, Vishvambar repeatedly exclaimed, "Go on reciting! Go on reciting!" as he rolled on the ground. The Lord said, "Chant! Chant!" And the pious Brahmana continued reciting. Thus, an enchanting ocean of happiness and Krishna consciousness manifest. The earth became soaked with the tears of the Lord, who manifest ecstatic symptoms like tears shivering and hair standing on end. When the pious Brahmana saw the Lord's great happiness, he recited the verses with increased devotion. Seeing his devoted recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Lord became pleased and embraced him. Being embraced by the Lord of Vaikuntha, Ratnagarbha became filled with love of God. Ratnagarbha wept aloud, as he clasped the Lord's lotus feet. Thus the Brahmana was ensnared in the network of Lord Chaitanya's love. As the Brahmana repeatedly recited verses with love and devotion, the Lord loudly exclaimed, "Go on reciting! Go on reciting!" On seeing this, the local inhabitants were struck with wonder and offered their respectful obeisances. Then Gadadhar said, "Do not recite any more." And everyone sat around Lord Vishvambar. After a short time, Lord Gauranga regained external consciousness and inquired, "What did you say?" What did you say? The Lord asked, have I been restless? The students replied, your actions are glorious. What power do we have to explain your activities? The Lord's intimate associates intervened. Don't indulge in praising him. Upon regaining his consciousness, Vishwambara restrained himself. Thereafter, he went with his associates to see the Ganges. He had offered obeisances to the Ganges and sprinkled water on his head. He then sat down on the bank of the Ganges with his associates. Just as the son of Maharaj Nanda enjoyed various sporting activities on the banks of the Yamuna, while surrounded by the cowherd boys, the son of Shachi enjoyed discussing topics of Krishna on the bank of the Ganges, surrounded by his devotees. After some time, Vishwambara sent everyone home and then returned to his own home. There, the Lord of the entire universe took his meal and then glanced towards Yoga Nidra. After the night passed, all the students came and sat down with their books to study. The Lord quickly returned from his bath in the Ganges, and after taking his seat, began to explain the texts. The Lord's explanations did not deal with anything that was not related to Krishna. He explained everything, every word, in relation to Krishna's devotional service. The students inquired, what is the definition of dhatu, or verbal root? The Lord replied, that which is called Krishna's energy. Oh, brothers, please listen as I explain the aphorisms about dhatus. I would like to see who has the power to refute my explanation. All the kings we have seen had luxurious bodies decorated with gold and beautified with fragrant sandalwood paste. Although their words determine a person's prosperity or death, hear what happens to them when their dhatu leaves their bodies. No one knows where the beauty of their bodily limbs goes, as some bodies are burned and some are buried. The energy of Krishna dwells in the body of every living entity as the dhatu, or active principle. All affection and devotion is meant for him alone. Because of illusion, teachers cannot understand this, yet consider carefully whether I'm right or wrong. There are persons to whom we now offer obeisances and respects, but when the active principle leaves their bodies, we must take bath after touching them. The son who has happily nourished on the lap of his father touches the fire of cremation to the mouth of his father after the active principle leaves him. That which is called dhatu is the power of Krishna, the beloved of all. Is there anyone who can deny this? Oh, brothers, please, render unflinching devotional service unto Krishna, whose energy is most pure and worshipable. Chant the name of Krishna, worship Krishna, and hear the name of Krishna. Day and night meditate on the lotus feet of Krishna. Anyone who offers a little water or durva grass at the lotus feet of the Lord is never subjected to the punishments of Yamaraj. Worship the lotus feet of Nandana, who delivered Aghasura, Bakasura, and Putana by remembering the holy name. Remembering that the holy name was not really that of his son, Ajamila attained by Kunta. Therefore, worship the lotus feet of Krishna. While serving his lotus feet, Shiva goes about naked. The service of those lotus feet is desired by Lakshmi. Take straw between your teeth and worship Krishna, whose lotus feet are glorified by Lord Ananta. As long as there is life and strength in your body, you should render devotional service to the lotus feet of Krishna. Krishna is your mother. Krishna is your father. Krishna is your life and wealth. I fall at your feet and beg you to engage your minds in thinking of Krishna. In the mood of a servant, the Lord continually narrated his own glories until half the day had passed. The charmed students heard the Lord's explanation with rapt attention. None of them dared to open their mouths. Knowing for certain that they are all eternal servants of Krishna, when Krishna himself is teaching, can they be anyone else? After a while, Vishwambar manifested his external consciousness. He felt ashamed by looking at everyone's face there. The Lord asked, "Was my explanation of the sutras? How was my explanation of the sutras on dhatus?" The students replied, "Your explanation was correct. There is no one arrogant enough to deny the meaning of every word that you have explained. Whatever you have explained is perfectly true, but the aim for which we study is different." The Lord said, "Would you explain to me everything I said? Perhaps I've been overwhelmed by a disorder of the nerves." What import of the sutras did I explain?" The students replied. "You have explained the name of Hari in all of them. You have explained that Krishna alone is the meaning of the sutras, the brief explanations, and the commentaries. But who is qualified to understand your explanations? By the transformations you undergo while hearing about devotional service, one can never consider you an ordinary human being." The Lord said, "In what form do you regard me?" The students replied, "As the perfection of all excellence. We have never before seen the tears of love, the shivering, and the hairs standing on end that you manifest. When you were teaching us yesterday in town, a pious Brahmin recited one verse. On hearing that one verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, you fell unconscious. We were amazed to see that there were no symptoms of life visible in your body. The way you cried. After regaining consciousness, it appeared that the golden Ganges had manifested there. When you eventually started shivering, even 100 persons were unable to hold you still. The hairs of your body stood on end, and your golden form was smeared with sweat, saliva, and dust. Everyone who saw you was struck with wonder and said, 'This person is Narayan himself.' Someone said, 'The mercy he has received is comparable to that received by Vyasadeva, Shukadeva, Narada, and Prahlad.' Then, with all their strength, they held you still. And shortly after, you regained external consciousness. You do not know all these incidents. Now please hear attentively what we have to say. Since the past 10 days, you have explained that devotional service to Krishna and the holy name of Krishna is the meaning of every word in the Shastra. For the last 10 days, our studies have been held up, but we were afraid to inform you of this. You know the unlimited meanings of every word. Who has the power to contradict even your light-hearted comments?" The Lord said, "Your studies have been held up for 10 days. Shouldn't you have informed me of this?" The students replied, "Your explanations were correct. The purport of all the scriptures is that Krishna is the absolute truth. This is the real study and the essence of all scriptures, and it is our fault if we do not accept it. Whatever you have explained is fundamental truth and the only knowledge worthy of the name. It is due to our own misdeeds that we do not accept it." The Lord was pleased on hearing the students' words. Out of compassion, he began to speak as follows. The Lord said, "My dear brothers, whatever you have said is true, but do not tell anyone what I have said. O brothers, I speak in this way because all I see is a blackish-complexioned child playing on his flute. I hear only the name of Krishna, and I behold the entire world as the abode of Govinda. I humbly apologize to all of you. From today on, I will not continue with studies. I am giving you permission to study with whomever you like without fear. No word other than Krishna manifests to me. This is the true state of my mind." While speaking in this way, Mahaprabhu, with tears in his eyes, tied up his books. The Lord's students offered obeisance and said, "We also make the same resolution as you. Now that we have studied under you, what can we learn from anyone else?" Being afflicted with separation from their teacher, all the students wept and began to speak as follows. "May the explanations that we have heard from you remain in our hearts birth after birth. Whom can we approach, and what can we study? We are quite satisfied with whatever we have learned from you." After speaking in this way, all the students offered respects to the Lord with folded hands and then tied up their books with cords. The students loudly chanted, "Hari, Hari!" Hari. Then the crest jewel of the twice-born began to cry as he embraced everyone. The students cried with their heads down, and they all merged in the ocean of transcendental bliss. The voices of all the students became choked. Then the Lord Sri Sachinandana blessed them all. Quote, "If I have been the servant of Krishna for even one day, then may all of your desires be fulfilled. All of you, take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, and may your mouths be filled with the names of Krishna. Constantly hear the names of Krishna. May Lord Krishna be your life and wealth. Whatever you have learned is enough. There is no need for further studies. Now let us chant the names of Krishna together. By the mercy of Krishna, let the purport of the scriptures be revealed to you. You are all my friends, birth after birth." On hearing the Lord's nectarian words, the students became filled with ecstasy. I offer my humble obeisances at the feet of those students who were sufficiently fortunate to become Lord Chaitanya's students. Know for certain that they are all eternal servants of Krishna. When Krishna himself is teaching them, can they be anyone else? Just by seeing those who saw the Lord's scholastic pastimes, one is freed from material bondage. I am such a sinner that I did not take birth at that time. Therefore I was deprived of the sight of those blissful pastimes. Still, O Lord, grant me this one favor. May your scholastic pastimes always remain in my heart. Evidence of the scholastic pastimes of the Lord of Vaikuntha is still seen throughout Nadia. Although the Vedas describe the, quote, appearance and, quote, disappearance of Lord Chaitanya, there is actually no beginning or end of his pastimes. In this way, the Lord's scholastic pastimes came to an end, and the congregational chanting of the holy names was begun. The students surrounding the Lord were choked with tears as he mercifully spoke to them. Quote, "You have studied and listened for many days. Now, let us chant the names of Krishna together to make everything complete." The students asked, how shall we perform Sankirtan? the son of Shachi, then personally taught them to chant as follows. Oh, Lord Hari, oh, Lord Krishna, I offer my obeisances to you, who are known as Hari, Yadava, Gopal, Govinda, Ram, and Sri Madhusudan. The Lord demonstrated for his students the process of kirtan by clapping his hands while chanting. The Lord of Kirtan personally chanted his glories as his students surrounded him and all chanted together. Last page. Absorbed in the sweet taste of his own name, the Lord rolled in the dust under its overpowering influence. The Lord repeatedly fell down here and there while crying out, "Chant! Chant!" The earth was cracked under his repeated falls. On hearing the sound of the uproar, all the inhabitants of Nadia came running to the Lord's residence. All the Vaishnavas who lived nearby immediately came there, and when they heard the sound of the kirtan, when the devotees saw the Lord overwhelmed with ecstasy, they thought they had never experienced anything so wonderful. They became fully satisfied at heart, thinking, "Now, Kirtan has been inaugurated in the town of Nadia. Is there such a rare devotion in the world? The purpose of the eyes is fulfilled by the sight of such devotion." This Vishvambar was the ultimate limit of all arrogance, and now we have seen in him love of God that is rare for even persons like Narada. If such an arrogant person can attain such devotion, then we cannot understand the will of Krishna or what this person will become. After a while, Lord Vishvambar regained his external consciousness, but he continually chanted the name of Krishna. Although the Lord regained his external consciousness, he did not talk of external subjects. Rather, he cried while rubbing the necks of all the Vaishnavas. Thereafter, all the Vaishnavas pacified the Lord and departed in great delight. Some of the students happily took the path of renunciation by following in the footsteps of the Lord. In this way, Mahaprabhu began to manifest himself, and the miseries of all the devotees were vanquished. Accepting Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu as my life and soul, I, Vrindavan Das, sing the glories of their lotus feet. Who can imagine what it was like in Nadia at that time? So the chapter heading is He Manifested Himself and Taught Nam Sankirtan. So this is the third part of this long chapter, Manifested Himself. And it's just in the beginning, but the beginning stages of ecstatic Nam Sankirtan. In the chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the advent of Lord Chaitanya is being discussed, I'm reflecting on comments that have been made practically in every class. It's really hard to relate or understand Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, but he when he was contemplating, Krishna was contemplating after his departing from his Vrindavan pastimes, how will people understand if they worship me in these pastimes? They'll develop a mode of awe and reverence, and they'll attain Vaikuntha, and they'll not be able to enter into the Vrindavan pastimes that I manifested. I want to make it available to them to enter into the Vrindavan pastime activities. I will manifest pastimes that have never been heard of in Vaikuntha. So, what to speak of this world, even Vaikuntha? So they're most extraordinary. So, we've been discussing this, but the human likeness of Ram's Leela and even Krishna's Leela makes it, for many, very attractive compared to the non-human like Varaha or Nrsimha. Many people are attracted to Nrsimha, of course, but the human likeness of Ram's Leela, it's so charming, so relatable, and the lessons are passed on in a way that people can relate to and emulate. And Gaura Leela is in another categories, but the purpose is another purpose. Besides supporting Dharma, it's supporting entering into Vrindavan pastime. That's Krishnadas Kaviraj's explanation of Krishna's contemplations, and thus I will perform pastimes never even thought of before in Vaikuntha. So what's that stage that's beyond liberation? It's in the Bhagavad Gita. The platform of devotional service is the platform of liberation. And what's beyond the platform of liberation? Mam choyo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena seve samati chaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. When it achieves the Brahman platform. And then from the Brahman platform, devotional service is being performed. Brahmabhuta prasanatma. Nasochati nakangsati samak sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. It points to, it confirms and underlines Lord Chaitanya's mission, but Lord Chaitanya's mission is to fulfill that. And it's a young student that's super smart and arrogant. Now that's worldly. That's not unheard of. They're super smart, arrogant young people. But when that moves into this other realm, super smart, not arrogant, and abjectly, totally humble, and so forth, bodily symptoms of bhava, again and again, and again and again and again and again. Well, how to understand that? What to speak of the people who were exposed to it? Just imagine if we saw something like that. Now, there's Sahajias that would imitate such things, and our Goswamis, although they were on that platform, they didn't exhibit those things. Commonly. We're on a very elevated path, aren't we? Now, let's go to the followers of Lord Chaitanya and how they received what they experienced from him. And, they conducted just as the verse that Lord Chaitanya accepted as the goal of life and the means to achieve it is Sthanes tatakshutikatam tanavan manobir, that verse from Brahma's prayers. Stay in your position. Shrutigatam tanavan manobir, so that the means to achieve it. Tanu van mana, body, words, and mind, dedicated to topics of Krishna. So that's doable. That's not beyond, out of sight, beyond comprehension. But that then, very good. Then go further. I've mentioned this. Do you have Nectar of Instruction here? Could you bring a copy? Nectar of Instruction, text 8. Purport. In that purport, Prabhupada is describing what we're just mentioned. The stanes to he doesn't quote the verse, but he's just describing where we are. We're in a position where we're being engaged. We're doing it right now, and our Hare Krishna movement is engaging us in staying on our position, whatever our psychophysical nature is. And, okay, you have it. In the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. This is called Shravana Dasha, the stage of hearing. By constantly hearing the transcendental holy name, Nectar of Instruction. But I've got it right here. Okay, beginning stage. In the neophyte stage, this is one paragraph. We're going to from 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. By constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna and hearing of his transcendental form, qualities, and pastimes, one can attain the stage of acceptance, called Varana Dasha. When one attains this stage, he becomes attached to hearing of Krishna Katha. So, dedication, acceptance, Varana, attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha. When one is able to chant in ecstasy, he attains the stage of smarana, vashtha, the stage of remembering. Recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance, and trance are the 5 items of progressive Krishna smarana. At first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted at intervals, but later, remembrance proceeds uninterrupted. When remembrance is uninterrupted, it becomes concentrated and becomes meditation. When meditation expands and becomes constant, it is called anusmriti. By uninterrupted and unceasing anusmriti, one enters the stage of samadhi, or spiritual trance. after smarana dasha or samadhi has fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position. At that time, he can perfectly and clearly understand his eternal relationship with Krishna. That is called sampati dasha, the perfection of life. Sometimes devotees ask, how are we going to know what our swarup is? There's a paragraph that tells how you're going to know what your swarup is. It becomes revealed. It's described in Krishna's pastimes that when Krishna manifests his pastimes, the ability to see him is made possible even to unwholesome people, to bad people, to demons. But, they can see him, they can see his form, and the potency for purification is there, but their contamination is so strong that their inimical tendency prevails. Now this is going over to Krishna Lila, but when there was the serpent that swallowed, or was swallowing Nanda Maharaj, it's a pastime. Krishna wanted to deliver that soul. So the pastime was enacted for the deliverance of that soul. Gandharva, resident of Vidyadhara Loka, who had been cursed by a sage because the sage was old and not good looking, and the Vidyadhara was young and opulent and beautiful, and so he mocked the physical features of the sage. The sage cursed him. You're envious like a serpent, you become a serpent, and he became a serpent. So, when the sage saw Krishna, when the serpent saw Krishna, that was the beginning. I mean, there's sequences. And then, when Krishna placed his foot upon the head of the serpent, immediately the soul and the Gandharva for the Vidyadhara form was released. Opulent, effulgent, ornamented, and so forth and so on. Offered prayers. But Kaliya also saw Krishna. And it wasn't just, seeing Krishna did it, or having Krishna touch his feet on his head did it. He smashed him and smashed him and smashed him and smashed him. Smashed him. But Krishna's very merciful, and there was a question asked by the wives of the Kaliya serpent after he was smashed and submitted to Krishna. The wives came forward and offered their prayers, and one of their prayers was, "What did our husband do to deserve this mercy from you?" So it turns out, now this is from which scripture? Garga Samhita. From Garga Samhita, Kaliya in his previous life was a sage. And in Garga Samhita, it describes how he, that sage, was cursed by another sage because he was saying, you can't stay here and do your tapasya on the same mountain as me. Go find another mountain. And the second sage said, "What? everything belongs to Narayan. And you're such a foolish person. You think it belongs to you? You're envious of Narayan. I curse you. You become a serpent. And then Ashvashira, Vedashira counter cursed. You become a crow. Then the description is in Garga Samhita. Then Lord Narayan descended before them and said, "Hold on, guys. You're my devotees. And, this one will be delivered this way and that one will be delivered that way. But, be nice." So their curses actually turned out to be the deliverance of both personalities. I'm going a little afield, but because it took a while to research this. The one that became the serpent achieved, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he achieved Goloka. He was sent back by Krishna to the Ramanaka lake where he could, now stop his enviousness, and he would be protected from Garuda because the marks of Krishna's feet were on his hoods. But according to Vishwanath, he became a resident of Goloka in the rasa of Dasya. And as far as the crow, it's in several different references. It's like not a straight line. You have to connect the dots. But the crow starts with a B, Bhushana or something like that. He was involved in the Ramayana. And he was reciting verses from the scripture. And he eventually was delivered. The crow, was delivered by Nilaparvat, the lake by Nilaparvat. That's found in the Skanda Purana. He touched the water of the lake on top of Nilaparvat, and immediately his body became transformed into a form by Vaikuntha form and is ascended to the heavenly realm. Vidyapati saw that. And that's what he came back and reported to the king. So he got liberation, and the other one got liberation. Though there was some previous activity, but it's convoluted when you make offense. But relief at the same time. So the Lord's activities, as Ramachandra and as Krishna, are transcendental. And worldly people look at them in a different way than devotees look at them. But the culture surrounding those who have faith in Ram and Krishna and chant their names, the culture of the people is altogether a different culture than the materialistic culture. Altogether different culture. And so it's a nice culture. What to speak of the culture that teaches people how to enter into Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, aside from worshipping in the mood of awe and reverence. Because it's specifically said in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it specifically said by Lord Chaitanya that I've come to deliver rasas in four features. And the one that's left out is Shanta. And Shanta is left out because in Shanta it says specifically in that section, there's not even a fraction of a speck of possessiveness, that meaning intimacy. It's neutrality. Shanta. So Lord Chaitanya didn't like there is Shanta rasa in Goloka. But Lord Chaitanya wanted to begin everybody on the platform of Dasya, even Kaliya. And by Krishna's association, even those entities in Shanta were stimulated to ecstatic love by seeing Krishna, by hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, etc. And so that's Krishna's pastimes, and Lord Chaitanya's pastimes is similar. And he was in the mood, or let's say in the position, social position of a Brahmana sannyasi. No, the Lord could have done whatever he wanted from whatever position he wanted, etc. But he was a Brahmana, and then a scholar, and then a sannyasi. Now, at this stage, he's not yet a sannyasi. He's a young grahastha. He's not even 20. He's a teenager. But, so it's otherworldly. And those who are attached to him are lifted to another otherworldly position. And the benefit for us is hearing these descriptions. And Vrindavan Das wants others, as he was lifted, as he writes, I wasn't fortunate enough to be born as one of these students. I came later. But I had the fortune of the association of those who had been his students. And we're having the association through his written form of associating Vrindavan Das, the disciplic succession method, hearing from one who has directly heard from, and so forth. And the potency is invested in those sound vibrations and those messages. Now circling back, although Lord Chaitanya says in Chaitanya Charitamrita that I will perform pastimes that even the residents of Vaikuntha have never even thought of, and it's beyond the Vedas, which are also the fourth dimension. So this is the fifth dimension. It is otherworldly for sure. And we have this really interesting task of, let's say, our younger generation devotees taking a look at, the world that's in front of them and getting a worldly education, at the same time cultivating Krishna Bhakti. In a world where, peer association generally in the world doesn't relate to Krishna Bhakti. And, we're kind of tasked with doing both, excelling and excelling. Or at least, doing reasonably and excelling. Well, we're not really excellent in any realm. So, life has its challenges. But the superpotency is there in these sound vibrations. And going back to this little paragraph from Nectar of Instruction, that's our method. It's our method. We rely on Krishna. We take help from wherever we can get it, but our real confidence is resting in Krishna. Now imagine if we had a school teacher that was like Lord Chaitanya.
I think we are like Kanya Maharaj.
Banging on our heads again and again and again. But Krishna was kind to Kaliya in his own way. And Kaliya got to, serve as a dance stage. And as he raised his envious hoods one at a time, Krishna jumped on them. I just did this with the devotees in China. Both feet, his hands like this, stomping on the head that raised up. And then another, till he was smashed. Blood was coming from his mouth and unrecognizable. Smash, smash, smash. Well, otherwise he's just dancing. But, from the observers, he was just dancing very elegantly. And from Kaliya's experience, he was the weight of the universe was on his head. He was stubborn. But he got relieved. So the message in Chaitanya Bhagavata, like a refrain from Vrindavan Das, the earlier Kanda, abundant materialism by the most learned people was a place of high learning. Navadvip. But people misusing it towards the materialistic affairs. It's not so different than our modern time, although it's more polished, but it's not so different. And that's the atmosphere. And it has its challenges, internally and externally. But the compelling thing is the internal cultivation through mercy and a sincere application of the hearing process. That's our hope. And it works. It's powerful. It works. Gradually, but it works. Gradually, because we like to hold on to the temporary. So let's see if there's some discussion. Our balcony seats, folks over there, you've been able to follow all this? Yes? Anyone in the room have some comments? You have something?
Yes, Manish.
Okay.
It's just a guidance factor question. Okay, it's not a reflection. To your point, actually the subject is more deeper. This is only what I'm thinking. I'm trying to put it out in front of.
Okay.
So all it boils down to is what kind of consciousness you are gaining on a daily basis, whether it is through your connection to the Lord, what you just made. But the way I see is everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. And in this case, where we just described about Kaliya and the crow example as well. Whether I see everyone, especially me, definitely I'll be going back to Godhead kind of a thing. I don't know if it is I also see that kind of impressions where you make or few devotees make, we are not there yet. But I don't know why I feel that everyone will be there at some point. It's not like far enough as we are into this movement already. And it's only a click of a moment where a person will be getting rid of those anarthas, and the actual consciousness is what it matters. And even though they have some kind of a material attachments, which will be gradually, it will be slowed down and they will be going towards this path. Is this a understanding we should carry, or we should have that kind of a fear factor, we are not meant for this?
Well, you threw out like 3 or 4 things. On the one hand, Prabhupada would say again and again, very quickly. And on the other hand, Prabhupada would say, it's rarely achieved. Rupa Goswami would say it's rarely achieved. So it's not, either or. It's not, a 1 or a 0, or, on or off. It's gradations. There's things where Prabhupada would say, you have to be 100%. Otherwise, you can't enter into fire unless you're fire. You can't go back to Godhead unless you're 100% pure. And 100% pure, who can say? 100% pure. I'm a certified 100% pure person. Who can say that?
I can say that.
Huh?
I can say that. That's the problem I'm having here.
Well, but it's not. It doesn't match reality. It doesn't match reality. I mean, the soul is of that nature, but the soul, there's contamination, and it's it's not imaginary contamination. It's contamination, and without making aspersions or something or analysis, there's contamination. To take it, this is what the non-contaminated state looks like. That's what it looks like. Or we can say, in Srila Prabhupada's life, he didn't always exhibit ecstatic symptoms. He sometimes exhibited ecstatic symptoms that showed what was going on inside. But his life of singular focus, nonstop. That's and all the other symptoms of bhava, non-wasting time, and and so many all the other symptoms of bhava. What to speak of prema? So that's we're not there. Without listing. Read the descriptions of what the stage of prema are from Rupa Goswami, and we're not there. So it's it doesn't match reality to say purity is there. So then to attain purity, we're not there. Then to attain it it's easy. But easy requires superlative endeavor. And superlative mercy, that's all in Krishna's hand. The mercy, bestowing of mercy is in Krishna's hand. Whatever endeavor we may make, the mercy is in Krishna's hand. I mean, pastimes like the Damodar Leela show that. If the mercy is in Krishna's hand, He can do anything, but he doesn't always do anything. That one may think he should, or he's a nice devotee, or I'm a nice devotee, and so he should. He does no should for Krishna. He is completely independent. And withholding his mercy is part of his mercy. Or withholding the mercy that one may think it should look like is part of his mercy. So, easy and not easy. It's easy in comparison to, because, very quickly the phrase is used. And that's a relative term, very quickly compared to what? And the sufficient potency is there in the bhakti process to achieve the perfection at once. at once, in a moment. And we're not there yet. Because we're still attached to misconceptions and trying to be the enjoyers of things. That's the disease of the soul that keeps the soul. Prapekshatmika Shakti. Trying to be the enjoyer of Prakriti. I don't know if I'm addressing your point. I'm speaking, it's somewhere in the ballpark, but not necessarily on target. Is it on target?
I'm getting there, but I may clarify again later on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maharaj, I wanted to understand the purpose of why Goswamis did not display.
Why what?
Why Goswamis did not display emotions of bhakti. You said that they did not, like Sahajas, they did not display, they withheld it. So what was the intention and purpose of it? Even Prabhupada did not.
Hey Radhe Brajadevi Ke Chalalite. You know the verse. Goswami Astaka. They were experiencing, and therefore they were exhibiting, the mood of humility, of eager to find Krishna. They weren't, I'm there, and here's the ecstasy of I'm there. It's part of their excellence is the mood of humility was profound and genuine. Mm. So that brings its own happiness, but the happiness and humility may not look like the happiness that we might think happiness is supposed to look like the rolling on the ground and standing of hairs on end. And it's kind of like a pressure cooker. It increased the eagerness pressure. Where is he now? That's one. And, and another is setting an example, because otherwise people would just imitate. And so rather than imitate, let them imitate this. Eagerness to find Krishna. So the activities of a great soul are to set example for others. I mean, it's right in Bhagavad Gita. When Arjun's saying, I don't want to fight, and, well, you don't have the qualification. Well, what if I have a qualification? Then can I do karma sannyas? No, you perform your duties because people will follow. So, they had that sense control. They could exhibit whatever for the purpose of educating and illuminating.
And I had one next question. Is it okay, ma'am? Can I ask this?
Yeah.
So in the previous class, I'm
thinking of Prabhupada in ways that he was not manifesting his internal ecstasy. It was expressed in terms of missionary ecstasy, and but rarely did he go into the external ecstasy and be unable to do his his missionary work. It would interfere with his missionary work, which was what he was feeling under the order of his spiritual master. And he knew it and he felt it, and he boomed it out very intensely. Anyway, because to stay with the mission, the service that he was given, he was checked by that.
So in the previous class also you said in the previous afternoon session you had said bhakti is not dependent on knowledge. But I have 2 points which make me which is not allowing my intelligence to accept that bhakti is not
Fine.
dependent on.
Okay.
First point is, as I read Bhagavad Gita and understand Krishna's teachings to Arjuna, and as I understand him as a person, Krishna, I feel devotion for him.
Yes.
So
That's
as
different.
a result of Bhagavad Gita knowledge, right?
That's different than Gyan Vairagya. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha. You know the verse. Janiyatiyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha. Yeah, so it's a different kind of jnana.
Transcendental.
Yeah. It's when we're reading Bhagavad Gita and you're feeling what you're feeling by reading Bhagavad Gita, it's not the empiric knowledge kind of gyan.
Okay, so when you say bhakti is not dependent on knowledge, when you say bhakti is not dependent on knowledge, that knowledge is empirical knowledge, like
Yes.
trying to approach Lord
Yes.
through my own
Yes. So
by giving up senses and all those things.
So
Jnana.
put it, keep it really simple. Bhakti, knowledge is a subset of bhakti. When you have $1 million, you have $10. Then you have $100. And with the $10 and $100, you can do stuff. When you got $1 million. So bhakti is the complete, and the subset of bhakti is knowledge. Now supposing one's bhakti is not full, it's just like beginning. We discussed this morning, but I'll say it again. The root cause of suffering is ignorance. And the antidote for ignorance is knowledge. Yeah. So you put knowledge in the environment of a soul that's covered by ignorance, and knowledge dissipates ignorance. So the suffering is dissipated, but bhakti isn't awakened yet.
Oh.
And therefore, because my suffering is diminished, then I go, hey. And it's then it goes back down again. It's ignorance again. It doesn't stick. It doesn't keep one up. There's no shelter. Bhakti is where you take shelter, not of knowledge, but of Krishna's lotus feet. And that's another kind. It's more matured and a different quality of knowledge and detachment. Because that kind of knowledge brings attachment to Krishna. And the other just brings detachment from matter. There's another kind of knowledge, and that's the modern education kind of knowledge, where whatever you, let's say medicine or even something that's like good for people or supposedly good for people. Without knowledge of the personality of Godhead, it's another avidya. It's another suffering. So bhakti isn't dependent. So when you're reading Bhagavad Gita, you're not cultivating Gyan. You're cultivating bhakti. Somebody else may read Bhagavad Gita and they're cultivating Gyan. And they don't get bhakti. They don't get Krishna. Krishna disappears. How can Krishna disappear? He's a speaker, but he disappears. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
This question, I would like to take it for Devkinandan Prabhu.
Devakinandan.
Yeah, he's
Let's hear
leaving
it.
after he's waiting for this question.
Okay, I'm ready for Devakinandan.
This is just opposite of me, what he... as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, one who is like, he's a sent person in the eyes of all the Goswamis of Vrindavan, but he himself calls worse than worm in the stool and lower than Jagai Matai.
Yeah.
It seems Krishna likes that mood. request is to elaborate.
Well, it's not just Krishnadas Kaviraj's mood. You know, that mood of humility. Let's go back to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, text number 8. Of the items of knowledge, the first on the list is humility. How can one have knowledge, what real knowledge is, if one is not humble? Or say it the other way, when one is real humble, truly spiritually humble, then there's the opportunity for knowledge. Because knowledge is this descending kind. If you're not humble, how can you get descending anything? So that humility manifests itself in different ways, in different souls, different pure, elevated souls. It'll manifest differently than it did with Krishnadas Kaviraj. That's perfectly fine, because we're all individual. But the principle of humility is a foundation for one who has knowledge and knowledge that brings bhakti. So it is the antithesis of what you said, but I'm just commenting on, it seems like Krishna likes that kind of humility that Krishna does. He likes humility, because that's a spiritual quality. I'm thinking specifically of Govinda, who was Ramanujacharya's servant. It was, and during one part of his exchanges, he was exhibiting what looked like arrogance. Like, I'm deserving of this and that and the other thing. And Ramanujacharya heard he was speaking like that, and he said, not deserve, but, he was receiving honor and feeling it's not enough, like that. So, Lord, he was asked by Ramanuja, why are you speaking like this? He said, because, the mercy that you have bestowed, that deserves all praise. So they're praising not me, they're praising you. And it's not sufficient. Something like that. I think, can't remember the exact flow. But so sometimes it's exhibited differently than what Krishnadas Kaviraj writes, but it's abject humility. Nothing for me, everything for those who are my superiors. And that kind of humility. Lower than the straw on the street. That's Lord Chaitanya's teaching. Okay? Anything else in the room? Online?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Archana Vaidya. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Your mask, yeah.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Since right now we cannot understand the elevated mood of Lord Chaitanya, with what mood should we hear these pastimes, and what should we learn from them?
What mood and what should we learn? Well, I've been trying to explain what we should learn. And the mood is to understand from his own words, understand his purpose, and try to hear the pastimes with that stated purpose in mind. That is, he wants to attract us to Braja Prem. And he knows that when he's doing these pastimes, and the devotees, when they're narrating his pastimes, the worldly mindset is not going to catch it. And he understands that his devotees explaining it understand it, and nonetheless they're explaining it and he's doing, because he wants to attract us to Braja Prem. So that's the mood. I'd like to understand Lord Chaitanya's lesson, because I'm way down here and his lesson is way up there. That's the mood. And how to, what's the lesson that we can learn? Don't imitate, but take the message. It's like, the holy name of Krishna is all over the place. That's what he's teaching. So how do we apply taking shelter of the holy name and seeing Krishna within everything. That's, each of us can do that in our own way. But let's say when we chant our japa tomorrow morning, and we're remembering these passages, it may have some impact on the attentiveness and the quality of our chanting. The vigor and vitality and enthusiasm with which Lord Chaitanya is giving these teachings to his students, to everybody that he comes in contact with. Okay, something else?
Yeah. From Swati Murali, how do we understand the various benedictions given in our scriptures? I appreciate the compassion of our acharyas, but sometimes it feels like bona fide loopholes. How do we understand this?
Bona fide loopholes. Read it again. I was distracted.
Okay. How do we understand the various benedictions given in our scriptures? I appreciate the compassion of our acharyas, but sometimes it feels like bona fide loopholes. How do we understand this?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you help me with what the question is? The glorifications seem to her to be bona fide loopholes. How does...
She might think that there's a lot of contradictory statements to that. That's maybe what she's saying.
Even I see as a contradictory in Guru Maharaj. What I see is, as our scriptures give a lot of benedictions, basically the paths, and also the humbleness factor is involved here, where acharyas are providing that kind of a path to provide the compassion, but are they giving us a bona fide loopholes in the sense, in my view, what she's meaning is
a shortcut?
A shortcut or a package. That's what I see.
I mean, it's easy to say stuff, but I'm not sure I understand the question. So
Mataji, can you again clarify your question if you can?
Yeah, send in it, reworded it so that we can understand what it is that you're asking. And meanwhile, anyone else? Anything? You've got something.
So, please forgive me if I'm not qualified to ask this question. So, bhakti is independent. I'm thinking about this question since long time.
Yes, bhakti is absolutely independent. It's not dependent on anything.
Krishna's mercy, not even Krishna's mercy.
Well, that's part of bhakti. That's part of bhakti. Independent means, material cause. It's not the effect of some material cause.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Now she's got it. Did she send a clarification? No.
No, she didn't, but someone on the Zoom.
Okay, Zoom. Off we go. Zoom.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, this is Amrit Anandas. Am I audible?
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Go ahead. You're on.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandvat all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj, Prabhu had asked a question earlier, I think it was Prem Kishore Prabhu, who was talking about, the surety or the confidence of going back to Godhead, and your explanation of how it is dependent on effort and mercy, and both are in Krishna's hands. It seems reasonable because nothing is actually ours, including our intelligence, capabilities, and anything else we may use in our endeavor. It's still given by Krishna. And of course, the mercy is also Krishna's. So in one sense, it would seem kind of depressing or futile as to then what's the point in me going through all this to go back to Godhead, because everything is on Krishna. And on the other end, my mind is coming to a conclusion that what we have is at least a free will, and how we exercise that free will. So my free will, I exercise to use it in service of Krishna in whatever I say or do. And that is my endeavor. And I'll leave the rest to him, because everything is dependent on him. So is this the correct way to approach or look at sadhana?
It got cut.
You can talk.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You give him the phone. He knows what to do. The phone. Okay. So if I understood what you said correctly, I'd like to modify, because the punchline is this understanding correct? It's not. In the first part you said, the effort and mercy are both in Krishna's hands. Effort is in our hands. As you said later, we have our free will, and exercising our free will is in our hands, and that's effort. And it's not everything is in Krishna's hands, so what's the use, because everything is in Krishna's hands. It's two. It's a relationship. It's from our side and from Krishna's side. Because we make effort, Krishna is not bound by our effort. Krishna is fully independent and we're dependent. We must make effort, but effort alone is not sufficient, because we're dependent. We're dependent on Krishna's mercy. And Krishna's mercy may come in the form of quick. That's just, like these words of glorification. Agasura and Bhakhasura and Putana were delivered. And what did they do? They were bad. But they were delivered because Krishna wanted to deliver them. And there's some details, but Krishna wanted to deliver them. He didn't have to, but he did. How merciful. So one can be delivered just by Krishna's mercy. That's possible. What kind of effort did they make? They did bad stuff. They were really bad. But Krishna's mercy is sufficient because he's the independent Lord. And from our position, we don't hang out with Putana and Agasura and Bhakhasura. We associate with devotees, and we make endeavor. That's our free will choice, back to your point. And then the second is, it's not just choose. Then there's degrees, like enthusiasm and increasing enthusiasm and increasing enthusiasm and increasing. And eagerness is something that's also in our hand, but there's inhibitors to our eagerness, and that is our distraction with the material coverings. We're in the Kaliya department, as was said earlier. So we get mercy, and what are we doing with it? We're trying to bite, trying to maintain our our position of happiness. So it does boil down to effort and mercy. And yes, now the bottom line from your question, that's what's in our department. That the way that I put it, what you're saying, I think is boiled down to, ours is the service department, and results is Krishna's department. So we voluntarily choose, we exercise our free will to do service to our capacity that's pleasing to Krishna, and that's where our attention and free will goes when we're properly guided and making proper free will choices. And when we do like that, we can count on Krishna's mercy. However, it will come at whatever pace, in whatever way he wants, because he's independent and we're dependent. How does that work? Hope that satisfies. That works? I guess so. Okay, Hare Krishna. Now back to Swati Murali. You have another question?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Panchatattva, usually we know that Mahaprabhu is the predominant amongst all five. And then, of course, we understand Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya and Gadadhar Pandit and Srivas. So, usually when we worship it is Gaura Nithai, and the other three are kind of excluded. So it feels a little, because each one has a such a wonderful contribution for just us having Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu comes to give us mercy, but he comes because Advaita Acharya is the one who called for him, seeing our condition. And then there's Nityananda, who's so merciful, the merciful manifestation. Then there is Gadadhar Pandit, and there's the devotee Srivas. So leaving the other three out when we are worshipping, it seems kind of awkward. So it's only during the Panchatattva mantra, while chanting Japa or doing Kirtan. So how to understand this, or how to not feel guilty? I don't know, guilty, but kind of feel they're left out, Maharaj.
I like your question. Can you hear me?
Maharaj, it's echoing.
Okay. Give him the phone because he knows how to fix it. It's a matter of consciousness that when you worship Gaura, you're not excluding, but it's inclusive. You know, when you say Radha Krishna, Radha includes all of her expansions. You don't have to name all of her expansions. That would take a long time. Or even the 8 principal expansions. But it's inclusive when you say Radha. And when you say Lord Chaitanya is inclusive of the Panchatattva. And when you say Gaura, then it's a specific aspect of the Panchatattva, but it's inclusive of the Panchatattva. And that specific aspect is the one who is Krishna's Lord Chaitanya's first expansion, who is in the superlative mood of manifesting Lord Chaitanya's Advent purpose, that is, delivering love of God through the chanting of the holy name, through Lord Nityananda. He stayed in Puri, and Lord Nityananda went here and there and distributed the holy name on behalf, he was the instrument of. So it's my point is, it's a matter of consciousness. Supposing, it's like Bhakti Vinod, it was Gaur Gadadhar. Now what about the rest of the Panchatattva when it was like maybe, hey, Nityananda's left out? It's just a mood, and with the mood, it comes the Panchatattva, the Lord Chaitanya in 5 features. That's the title of the book that Prabhupada had published, Lord Chaitanya in 5 features. So when you say Lord Chaitanya, it means the others. When you say Gaura, it means that giving of the holy name aspect of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda's function on that behalf, on his behalf. So if you like, I know a devotee who liked the Panchatattva mantra more than he liked the Hare Krishna mantra. And he just liked it. I mean, he just liked the sound of it. He liked chanting it. He repeated it over and over. I don't know what kind of japa he chanted. I think he chanted Hare Krishna mantra. But he liked... So you like, and you say that you worship Panchatattva. And say the Panchatattva mantra, and that's your affection. That's your you're feeling, I don't want to exclude the other ones, so include the other ones. And that's your heart. But there may be others that are emphasizing this particular feature of the Panchatattva and worshiping Gaurnitai. And it's not like they kind of let the other three just drop off their consciousness. They have their function. And you two will make you and this other person will make really good pair. Sing a duet. How are we doing? Okay, Hare Krishna. I think we're ready to end.
Yeah.
Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
No, hold on.